The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Welcome to another episode of the Love in Action podcast. We are the only business show that explores the powerhouse leadership principles of love and care. Glad you could join us, and thank you for being here. We know there are millions of podcasts out there. We're honored that you chose to spend time with us. Now, if you're new to the show and you like what you hear, would you do us a kind favor? We rely greatly on those positive reviews and 5-star ratings to keep the show ranked high and help more people to find it. This is only going to take 2 minutes of your time. Grab your phone, go to the Apple Podcast app, search for the show, Love in Action, and then click on it, and then scroll to the bottom, and you're going to see a link to write a review. Tell us what you loved about it. We'd be grateful if you could do that, and we thank you in advance. We got a great show lined up for you. In a few minutes, we'll be featuring our mailbag segment where we take your questions on the air. And later on, I'll be speaking with Cary Cherniss, professor of applied psychology at Rutgers University. The topic we're going to be diving into is emotional intelligence and, how to use your EQ to deal with real life situations. So stay tuned for that segment. So let me welcome in my awesome co-host, 3-time author, global speaker, leadership coach, and most recently, an inductee into the annual Power List of the top 200 biggest voices in leadership for 2023. Say hi to Robb Holman.
Marcel, you're the best. The awesomeness is right back at you. I'm excited to be with you and share and learn. So let's have at it, my brother.
All right. Well, so I thought I'd bring up this topic of discussion that resonates with a lot of leaders. I know you get this a lot from your clients, and so many leaders struggle with understanding how to provide good leadership, not provide good management. You can be in a management role and manage the work really well, but are you leading people really well as well? So in other words, are you providing good leadership? But there's a lot of ways that we can take this discussion on providing good leadership. So when you think about what it takes to provide leadership, what comes to mind for you, Robb?
Well, right off the bat, Marcel, I think it's a wonderful topic to talk about, because there is a distinction. When I think of leadership, I can't help but think of a very effective shepherd, with sheep. A really good shepherd is there to guide.
Yeah.
They're there to protect.
Yeah.
And they're there to correct. So think about that: to guide, to protect, and to correct. And so it brings so much more to that. But just for conversation's sake, when I think of guidance, bring a sense of direction to where we need to be, where we need to go, and share in that with those in your sphere of influence. Then you look at protect. We need to protect our people. We need to stand firm with our people, united front in that way as well. But those are just some items that initially come to mind. I have not touched on the correction piece, which has to do also with accountability. Yes, I said the A word in the Love in Action podcast today, but it speaks to accountability, not in a harsh way, like how you're missing the gaps, but are we holding our people accountable to the greatness in them, to inspire them for deeper and greater places? At the same time, maybe seeing some of those weaker areas also improved. So guide, protect, and correct. But how about you, Marcel?
I love it. I love the my imagery of the shepherd, stretching out the staff and then yanking a lost sheep that's kind of straying away back to the fold. Yeah. And I think that's the correction part. To me, I'm going to speak to the guidance part. Okay. Providing good leadership means, to me, communicating clearly and consistently, and always, as a leader, clarifying goals and expectations. So I'm going to take a chapter straight from Gallup's research. Okay. So if you were to send out a quick survey to your employees, if you're a manager right now listening. So be honest here. How would your employees answer this question on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being best? I know what is expected of me at work. Okay, so that statement is straight out of Gallup's Q12 survey that measures employee engagement. They've been doing it for, 40, 50 years now. So a great question that you need to know the answer to is, do your team members really know what is expected of them at work? So check this out, Rob. Gallup found that this is one of the most powerful predictors of performance, knowing what is expected of me at work. So that the teams that have high scores on this one item are more productive, they are more profitable, and they're even more creative. But here's the bad news.
Yeah. Oh, there's bad news. I don't know if we want to hear the bad news, Marcel, but I guess we gotta hear it. Come on.
Gallup found that only half of 30 million employees that strongly agreed with the statement, I know what is expected of me at work. That's alarming to me.
Ooh,
that only half of 30 million actually agreed with that. So even in well-defined roles like truck driver and security guards, sales, and registered nurses, they're saying those people are basically saying that they agree. Only half of those people are agreeing with that statement. And the most shocking part to me is that the number drops to 1/3 for those in scientific, technical, and computer-related jobs.
Really?
So these are the smartest people, right? It's not uncommon for your knowledge workers with higher education and much higher salaries to basically say, hey, I really don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, that's amazing. Those statistics. I was like, at first, I was like, no, I don't want to hear the bad news. Don't want to hear. But isn't it important to us as leaders and managers? We need to hear the good. We need to hear the bad and the ugly. Feedback is absolutely invaluable so we can make the necessary changes, enhancements, tweaks, call it whatever you want, to be the best version of ourselves because our team members are waiting. As it relates to expectations, I think the reason why so many people aren't on point with what their expectations are is because so many different organizations, whether it be non or for-profit, may only visit or revisit them once or twice a year. I think we need to be committed to, as leaders, managers, we need to be committed to a process of where when we get together with our people, we need to revisit those expectations on a very consistent, regular basis. Why? Because so much happens in such a short period of time anymore.
Yeah. With
the use of technology and projects and decisions and acquisitions and so much is happening. So much is coming at us so fast. And then we got to maneuver. We got to talk. So our expectations and revisiting them have got to also reflect the fast-paced life and cultures that our businesses have. So let's be committed as leaders and managers to revisiting the expectations with our people at a minimum monthly basis. Yes, I said monthly basis during our one-to-one times.
I love it, Rob. Thank you for that. And you brought up such a great point because as we have experienced with the pandemic, things change drastically. We've been in a kind of a state of flux over the last 3 years. And this is one of the top reasons that Gallup found why employees are disengaged and why things go south is because during those times of change and transition and uncertain times, people don't have clear expectations.
No.
The old saying, right? That the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And that's true for a lot of workplaces. As things change, employees are not given clear communication on direction.
And what happens, Marcel, is they just start coming to them that aren't a part of their job description, their responsibilities. And then there's this underlining thing from, a team member, a boss, or whatever, like, yeah, you just need to get it done. And it's like, and then you might do it at first as a favor, bit of an obligation, but it's not a genuine opportunity.
Yeah.
And what happens is we can start to be inward. Here comes inside out leadership, Marcel. We can start to fester these really frustrating, angry emotions and keep it within. And that can give way to some resentment and bitterness. And then all of a sudden, this quiet quitting that's oftentimes talked about starts happening, and we start to check out. And then when people find out what we really think or how we really feel, they're completely blindsided and surprised. Be like, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? Well, because it's been a process internally that's happened in our response to a lack of expectations.
I love it. Thanks for that. All right, let's go to our favorite segment, mailbag.
Yeah, let's get it on. I love this part, Marcel.
That's right. It's mailbag time. You send in your questions. Rob and I will read it on the air. Gina from Seattle, Washington writes, what's a great way to ensure that we are developing a healthy community of work where people are getting along and not in conflict or competing against each other for resources? Okay. I talk a lot about this because one of the things I teach on in my course is exactly that, is building community. But before I dive into that, what are your thoughts on Gina's question? I mean, she doesn't want conflict. She wants people to get along. What does a healthy community of work look like to you, Rob?
Gina, you're talking to a peacemaker. I am a middle child. I have an older brother of 2.5 years older. I have a younger sister, 2 years younger. I am the peacemaker in the family. I am the one that wants harmony. I want togetherness. I want unity. So I'll say this, whatever you can do, Gina, to remain committed in a place and foster a culture within your team dynamics of getting to know the person before the professional. And is just going to be, it's admirable, it's praiseworthy, and it leads into a more unified team. One of the practical things that you can do is share personal stories. Personal stories. Don't just keep professional now. Don't worry, you'll have times to share some professional stories. But when you actually get to know each other as human beings, maybe a life milestone, something along your journey that's helped shape you to become the person you are today. Yes, I said person you are today. Now that's an invitation and an opportunity for your team members to better get to know you, and also for you to better get to know them. Marcel, that's just my 2 cents. Okay, maybe 3, but now we want to hear from you. So what do you have to say?
I love it. And of course, I mean, everything starts with building a healthy relationship with one another if you're going to have a healthy community. One of the things that I am seeing less and less of is this idea that you can't ask for help anymore, because if you do, you're seen as weak, as incompetent, and who knows, maybe if I ask for help, the boss is going to say, what did I hire you for? You're supposed to figure this out on your own. Okay. So the research out there saying that cultures where you make it safe for people, employees, coworkers, colleagues, et cetera, to ask for help, it actually leads to greater creativity, greater collaboration. And of course, those are all things that lead to good business outcomes. So to me, Gina, is to set the expectation that in this workplace out there in LA for you, it's okay for you to, if you're a worker, it's okay for you to, when you're struggling with something, don't be a lone ranger and don't be an island drifting out in the sea. No, come and ask for help and make it okay for people to do that. I have been in environments way back 20 so years ago when I was in the corporate grind where it was not safe to do that, Rob. You couldn't ask for help.
Yeah. Times are changing now, and people are changing because they're starting to realize the importance of asking, to your point, asking for help and the need for help. I mean, those are the 3 of the most powerful words I've ever spoken. I need help. It's a tremendous strength. Thank you, Marcel.
Yeah, I love it. And Gina, so the whole point of what Rob and I are just said is that all leads to building a healthy community at work for you out there in LA. And we hope that you do. And we wish you great success on that. So, all right, that's all we got for you today. He is the great Robb Holman. Robb, I want to send like 1,000 listeners right now to learn more about what you do. And so where can people find you and book you for a speaking engagement or get some leadership coaching?
Man, I'll take 1,000 any day, Marcel. I was just thankful to have one. If you said one, Mark, no. I think the greatest place to go for some of my free inside out leadership resources and to learn more about me is robbholman.com. Thank you so much, Marcel. Appreciate you.
Yes. And I'm Marcel Schwantes, and my mission is to spread more actionable love and care in the workplace. To learn more about how I can help your leaders create a servant leadership culture of high performance, you can visit my website, marcelschwantes.com. I'm coming right back to talk with Rutgers University professor Cary Cherniss after a quick break. Hang tight. Hey, it's Marcel. Imagine how awesome it would be if this year, 2023, your employees were more engaged and into their work. They made better decisions, collaborated without any of those people issues, and just performed at a high level to produce great work. As leaders, we know that these attributes eliminate countless headaches and help scale the business. But quite shockingly, we often see the exact opposite behaviors take place in our teams. So we developed a hybrid leadership course to help emerging leaders bring out the best in their people. So together with your management team, we're going to help you identify the leadership skills that will result in high performance in yourself and in your employees. We're going to identify what it takes to inspire, motivate, and engage human beings to do their best work. We're going to teach you the leadership habits that will attract A players to come work for your organization. You're going to learn how to overcome the number one obstacle to clear communication. And you'll discover your personality strengths and blind spots and how to overcome those blind spots to help improve your work relationships. If you want to learn more about this unique leadership course, visit my website, marcelschwantes.com, and click on training. So here is what's on my mind today. For decades now, the conventional wisdom was that our emotions have no place in the business world, in our workplaces. I mean, we got to check our emotions at the door, the saying goes. And so the ideal leader for several decades now is somebody that has to come into work and think about things rationally and, just be unemotional. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, really. So here's the reality, though. If you work in an environment, in groups, in teams, and that's probably the majority of us for any extended period of time, and you're taking on challenging tasks and projects, and you're collaborating and exchanging ideas, or maybe even pushing back against someone's idea, you better believe it that emotions are at play here. I mean, it's just inevitable. And so, but here's the thing, though. If you use emotions effectively to your advantage, especially in a leadership role, I mean, it's going to be a game changer for you. And that's why the topic of emotional intelligence is one of my favorite topics. I mean, I've probably written over 80 articles on my Inc.com column. And the data is clear that emotional intelligence, or EQ or EI, whatever you want to call it, I go by EQ, is a prerequisite for good leadership. To try and lead without emotional intelligence these days, folks, I mean, by my book, is just disastrous. And not only that, I mean, it's self-serving. I mean, yeah, you might get the job done, you might drive people to results, but it's all about you. And it's not the kind of leadership that brings people closer together to work more effectively. So today we're going to dive into the world of emotional intelligence by talking with an expert who has observed and studied leaders with the competencies of emotional intelligence and really how they have used their EQ to deal with challenges and also to build relationships with others. Cary Cherniss, along with his co-author Cornelia Roche, published their findings in the book Leading with Feeling: 9 Strategies of Emotionally Intelligent Leadership. Now, this is a book that is going to help managers better understand, well, not only what emotional intelligence is or how to measure it, or even how it's linked to your bottom line results, but Cary shows shows you kind of how to use your EQ to deal with those real life situations that we all face in the workplace, right? Because people are all different. And so as the leaders they have studied have done so, they have published their findings and came out with these 9 strategies that we're going to cover a few of them. And Cary's going to join us shortly. He is currently Professor of Applied Psychology Emeritus at Rutgers University. Dr. Cherniss specializes in the areas of what else? Emotional intelligence, as well as work stress and burnout, leadership development, and planned organizational change. He has published over 70 scholarly articles and book chapters on these topics, as well as 8 books, including The Emotionally Intelligent Workplace with Daniel Goleman. In addition to his research and writing, Dr. Cherniss has consulted with many organizations in both the public and private sectors, including American Express, Johnson & Johnson, the U.S. Coast Guard, AT&T, and the list goes on and on. Cary now joins us. So, Cary, the term in emotional intelligence, it's been around for what 30 years or so. It's such a buzz term these days, and I think it's overused, personally speaking, and there seems to also be some confusion around the exact meaning. I mean, what is emotional intelligence? So clear the air for us, and also because, the book title, Leading with Feelings, seems to indicate that the two are connected. So in your own words, how would you define emotional intelligence?
You're right, Marcel. There really is a lot of confusion and to a certain extent, some controversy over what we mean by emotional intelligence. But I think all the experts in the field do agree on a kind of general definition, which is that emotional intelligence is the ability to accurately perceive, understand, use, and manage our own emotions and the emotions of other people. Now, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. A story, I think, is worth almost as many words. So let me give you one of my favorite examples of not only emotional intelligence, what it is, but also how a very effective leader uses it. This was a principal of an elementary school in I guess what we would call a disadvantaged area. A lot of kids from poor families, broken homes. And yet, contrary to expectation, in this particular school with this principal, they just, aced all the intelligence tests, the achievement tests. And she had won lots of awards and the like. So I was interviewing her for another one of my books. And she said something at one point that just really brings it all together. She said, one of the things I've learned is that my emotions are contagious. And if I'm having a bad day and the staff are aware of it, pretty soon, almost every teacher in that school is going to be, doing not her best. So what I do is every morning when I get to school, when I'm still in my car in the parking lot, I do a check to see, how am I feeling? Am I really ready? Am I feeling positive? Am I feeling enthusiastic? And if the answer to those questions is no, I don't go into that building. I sit there, and if it takes 5 minutes, I get to the point where I am enthusiastic, where I really am looking forward to it. And that's when I get out of the car and get into that building. And when you think about the definition, that says it all. She is monitoring her emotions. She understands how important those emotions are in affecting other people's emotions and their performance. And she's come up with a terrific technique for managing those emotions. Actually, probably a few techniques. She didn't go into the details about what she did in the car, whether she was, listening to the radio or, whatever it was. But she had those techniques that she could rely on.
Yeah.
So that's really the importance of emotional intelligence for leadership and what it is in a nutshell.
Yeah. So when I hear a strategy with the label monitor the emotional climate, to me, that just translates to being aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
and checking it. So it's really, the verb is important because it's not just being aware of your emotional surrounding. Obviously, that's something a leader can't do all the time anyway. They'd be totally incapacitated. But the outstanding leaders do it periodically. So a leader will walk into a meeting, which one example is a leader who met every week with her top management team. She was the CEO of a large company. And as soon as she walked into that room, she would look around. That was the priority. She would look around and look at the nonverbal cues to give her a sense of what, the emotional climate was like. And also to see which of her 8 or 9 top leaders was having a bad day, or which one really seemed to be feeling good that she could kind of leverage in running the meeting. So yeah, that's pretty much what monitoring the emotional climate is. So
I'm going to test this out. Tell me if my assumption is correct here. For somebody that isn't able to effectively read the room and monitor it, like you said, continuously. Okay, so here's what happens. in my understanding is 2 employees may have a slight argument one day. And now that argument escalates where now it becomes a group of people involved in an argument that is affecting morale, perhaps cross-functionally. Okay. The leader didn't pick up on that slight argument on that first day, which now has escalated. And then a week later, now it's become such a problem that people are creating silos and taking sides. Now departments are faced off against each other. And all that because the leader did not read or did not have the emotional awareness to kind of read the room and understand the climate, the environment, from that initial argument that just became a much bigger issue. Is that something are we seeing that?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great example, Marcel. I'm going to borrow that one and give it as an example of what can happen when you're not able to monitor the emotional climate, or if you let things go. I mean, there were 2 problems there. One is not being aware of what's going on, being clueless, and you really need to begin there, as we were saying before. But also there are a lot of leaders who are aware of it, but they don't know what to do. And the idea of intervening in some active way, might hurt people's feelings or, make it worse. That's just too much for them to handle. And so it's also managing the emotion or not being able to manage the emotion, not being willing to manage it, that can also lead to those negative effects.
Yeah, to me, it seems so simple. Again, if you have the EQ to understand when there is a small conflict, to nip it in the bud before it becomes a bigger conflict that now is going to be a detriment to your morale issues, your productivity, and the performance of people. And all because that small molehill you didn't deal with has now become a mountain, which is even harder to deal with now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the second one that I picked out, I found this one interesting. Express your feelings to motivate others. And that's strategy number 2. Now, I know that we shouldn't suppress our emotions. We shouldn't sweep things under the rug, as they say. But where do you draw the line with expressing your feelings? I mean, we don't want to wear our emotions on our sleeves as leaders, right?
Yeah, I keep going back to stories from the book because I think it's easier for me, at least, to answer a question like that with a story. I'm thinking about one of the leaders. Actually, I used her as an example just a minute ago, the CEO of a mid-size architectural and engineering consulting firm. as I said, she met with her top leadership group every week. The company had gone through layoffs for the first time. I mean, the whole industry was going through a difficult period. And for the first time in the company's history, they had to lay off about 10% of the employees. And so for several weeks after that, when they went around and they reported in, the reports were really uniformly negative. I mean, things were just going from bad to worse. But at one of these meetings, the meeting started and they were going around and the reports were pretty negative again. And they got to the chief financial officer, who gave a little more upbeat report. But instead of people saying to themselves, if not to others, wow, that's really good. Maybe things are, going to start getting better now. They just sort of, nodded in a almost robotic way and started, the next report on the agenda. And this is where the leader used that emotional intelligence again, and particularly that second strategy of expressing her own emotions. She understood and realized that this was going to be a missed opportunity in terms of, improving morale, not only among these 8 or 9 leaders, but also emotion is contagious. Leaders have a big impact on other people's emotions. So she jumped in and she said, hey, wait a second, you guys. This is really good news. Let's stop and take a minute or two to reflect on, what we've been doing these past few weeks that is helping to turn the things around. And so that's what they did. And as they were, thinking about and verbalizing some of the good things that they were doing, she would respond, in a positive, enthusiastic way. Now that brings us to a really important point here, and that is for people to understand that in this case, for instance, expressing emotions effectively, it's something they can't fake. Well, I mean, they can fake it, but it's not effective.
Right.
You've got to express the emotion. I mean, hopefully they can find instances where they are feeling positive, where they are getting enthusiastic, like in this leader's case. But don't overdo it because people will recognize it.
Yeah.
She was an introvert. She wasn't the sort of person who got really, wild and excited. But she knew herself. Again, she was aware of her emotions and how she would express them. And so she just, sort of opened up the faucet and let it come out as a sort of a normal expression rather than overdoing it, because then they would be suspicious.
Yeah. This is interesting. Now, regardless of your personality type, you mentioned that she was an introvert. Okay, wherever you are on that scale, and yes, it has to be authentic emotions. Now, you're not faking it, right? Because people will see right through you. So, is there a powerful and effective emotion that we should be expressing more of if we do it genuinely?
Well, I think empathy is certainly important in terms of what leadership is all about. But I think if I had to, think off the top of my head, I would think that enthusiasm is probably the most important. Again, don't overdo it. If you're an introvert, like this leader I was talking about, like myself, most of the time I don't get that enthusiastic. And that's something that I've actually worked on over the years. It's interesting. Several years ago, I came across a study of effective classroom teaching. And they looked at a lot of traits that teachers had and a lot of emotions and behaviors. And they found that the one that was most strongly correlated with student learning and student satisfaction was enthusiasm. So that's when I started looking at myself and saying, gee, I'm not really enthusiastic enough. And I'm going to try to be a little bit more enthusiastic.
That's interesting that you said that, and because the word enthusiastic to me encompasses more than just being excited for somebody. It's having a positive mindset, and being optimistic around about things. And like you said, you don't have to. It comes natural, whatever your personality type is, introvert, extrovert, etc. We can express enthusiasm in our own unique way to impact other people around us.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right. So I want to tie this in to something that's going on right now. So we're recording this in the middle of February 2023. And Cary, there are layoffs going on right now. And this is a really emotional time for people. I mean, their livelihoods are at stake. And I have seen layoffs handled very poorly by some big tech firms. You know who they are. And, layoffs not only affect those being laid off, of course, but it also affects those colleagues and coworkers who remain, whose friends got just uprooted, right? So talk a little bit about, the strategy of express your feelings to motivate others. How does a leader do that around something as tragic as a layoff?
One of the leaders that we interviewed for the book talked about just that. I asked her how she handled really significant layoffs that had just happened recently. So this is how she described it almost verbatim. She started off by just sitting down and getting in touch with her own feelings, not trying to suppress them, not trying to sugarcoat it, make it more positive, but to really, recognize how hard this was for her. And then she recognized that, it was very difficult. I mean, she had been very close with some of these people, had worked with them for years, and were friends as well as colleagues and subordinates. So after, kind of getting to a point where she felt she could move on and start talking to others about this, she got in touch with how other people might be feeling. Obviously, a lot of people would be feeling exactly the way she was feeling. And so she reminded herself of that. And then she was ready to meet with all the employees. So a few days after the layoffs were announced, she met with the employees that were, all the employees, those who were being laid off, as well as the 90% who were still going to be there. And she started off by saying, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is an awful thing. Let me start by telling you how I feel about it. And she did. Again, she was able to modulate it, manage her own feelings. So, it wasn't like she broke down sobbing, but, she was tearing up. People recognized that this was not an easy thing for her either. And so she, after a brief description of how it affected her, she said, all right, now I want to hear from you and hear how this is affecting you. And let's spend some time on that, because I don't want to, just move ahead as if everything is normal. And so they went on for a while, and she gave them, plenty of opportunity to talk about it. But she was also, strategy number one, monitoring the emotional climate, looking for the point in the discussion when it looked like people had had enough, they were ready to move on. And when she detected that happening, she said, okay, let's talk about what comes next. I want to share with you our plans for how we're going to move ahead. And, I'm kind of excited about some of the things that we're thinking about. So let me share them with you. And she started feeling more upbeat, more positive. And that was something she hoped would help the rest of her employees to do the same. Again, remember, leaders, their emotions are contagious. So if you're in a leadership position, and most of us are, either, in formal positions or informally, keep in mind that the people who are looking up to you, they're going to imitate however you're feeling. So that's what she did. And interestingly enough, the other 2 or 3 leaders who talked about layoffs described how they dealt with them in almost the identical same way.
Cary, as we wind down here, what's your ultimate hope for people reading your book?
My ultimate hope is that they will take, not all 9 of these strategies to begin with, but maybe 1 or 2 of them that they'd really like to work on and just begin practicing using them. Because I really, really believe that most people, most leaders have the emotional intelligence they need to be more effective in that position and to feel, better about themselves as leaders. But what happens to many of us, including those who have quite a bit of emotional intelligence, is that when we get into a really stressful, difficult situation, we kind of lose it. We become frazzled. And so I think it's helpful to have these very concrete strategies and principles and stories to help them. And then it just takes practice. But eventually it'll become second nature. And then they'll be able to use that emotional intelligence they now have more effectively.
That's great. So, Cary, we have a tradition on the show. We pose you the leadership love question. So of all the ideas that we have discussed, or maybe one of the strategies that we didn't cover yet, how do leaders lead with practical and actionable love day in and day out?
I think another good example of that was the head of a local, a county-wide child protective services agency. One morning he woke up, turned on the local news, and heard that one of their clients had, during the night, killed her 2-year-old child and then turned the gun on herself. And he knew, nothing like this had ever happened to him in his experience as a social worker. He knew it would be devastating for his staff, but he also knew that he had to pull himself together, go into the office, and spend the rest of the day helping them to come to terms with this awful situation. And that, I think, is really, that's when the loving care becomes most needed and also most apparent in those of us who can muster it.
Yeah, not only on a day-to-day level, but especially when crisis arises, we need to show up with that kind of compassion and love for other people. Yeah. All right. So we bring it home with 2 questions, as we do with every guest. Okay. Personally, Cary, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
Well, I think like many of us in this country today, I'm very sad and anxious about the state of our democracy and about the polarization and the partisanship that has really torn us apart. And I just, hope that we can manage to maybe use emotional intelligence, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, to bring our leaders, particularly our political leaders at all levels, closer together.
Yeah. For every 10 guests I bring on this show, probably 9 of them will say the exact same thing that you mentioned, this polarization, this divisiveness that we're seeing in our country. And it's so easy to fix that if we come to the middle and start to converse with one another, to understand the other side. We don't have to agree with the other side, but at least to come to the table to dialogue. It would lend to having a lot more empathy for other people as well. So, yeah. All right. Finally, Cary, you close us out with in your own manner, with a key takeaway or something to keep us inspired.
Oh, okay. Well, I hope what I've said so far is inspiring. I'll go back to something I said a minute ago, and that is, don't give up. Don't assume that you already have all the emotional intelligence and are using it brilliantly, but also don't feel discouraged, because I really think that most of us, it's like any of our intelligences. We're not all going to become Isaac Newtons or Einsteins, but most of us manage to at least get through beginning algebra in school. And it's the same with emotional intelligence. Most of us have enough that we can really build on it. And I hope that our talk today and what we have in the book will help people to do that.
Speaking of the book, one more time, Leading with Feeling, and there it is. Cary, if people want to get a hold of you, connect with you, where can they go?
LinkedIn is good. I'm on LinkedIn. They can also just Google me, Cary Cherniss, Cherniss, as in Sam, or just go to the Rutgers University website and plug in my name. It'll come up, and you can get my email that way.
It's been an enlightening conversation, and we are all better for it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Marcel.
And you can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes on my website, marcelschwantes.com. You can find all the links to all the resources there, including the episode on YouTube if you prefer to watch it. And I'll be sure to include Cary's website and places for you to connect with them there as well. And finally, hey, we're always looking for sponsors to spread the Love in Action movement globally. If you're interested, let's chat. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.